Hi everyone, how are you? This is Summit from Talksonground. Good to see you again. First off, I think we must address the most important event of the day, which is the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And I think that's a very sad day for
Miraculous
democracies
escape
all
as
around
a
the world,
bullet grazes Trump's
especially when
ear.
the Americans or the USA is the harbinger
Assassination
of
attempt.
democracy everywhere.
Say
So it's
investigators.
a very
Biggest test for FBI.
it's not a good look, and we I think we should all get together and condemn it. And number two, I think we should celebrate the fact that Donald Trump has survived and is hale and hearty and showed great courage to come out of that like the way he did. Having got that out of the way, uh, so let's understand what's happening with this hug mania, if I can call it. So the Americans have taken great umbrage with this Modi hug with Vladimir Putin, and they are going ballistic. They had many issues when it came to uh, the trip that Modi made to Russia recently, but their major concern was really whether he will hug him or not. And however vain that sounds, it does seem that the US establishment was really looking to make sure that the optics of the NATO summit are good. But unfortunately for them, Modi did make the trip. He did end up hugging Mr. Putin, and that made global headlines. And there's been a spat between India and the US after that. The spat, by the way, has continued for the last whatever 10 months, 9 months, since right at the end of G20 last year in New Delhi. Just after the G20, when Justin Trudeau of Canada, the Canadian Prime Minister, had made some unsubstantiated allegations, whatever that terminology is, against India trying to bump off somebody in Canada. So since then, the relationship has not been where it should be. Uh, it seems that President Biden had refused to attend the 26th January Republic Day parade as the chief guest, and that's diplomatically not a good place to be at. And there has been a lot of concerns in India about election interference by the Americans, among other people, and the main reason being that the US establishment is not very happy or comfortable with Prime Minister Modi for whatever reasons. Now, coming to this whole concept of India and the US fighting over this hug is really a symptom of the major problem, which is that the US dollar is really under pressure, and India is not only at the center of both East and West diplomatically, it's also a rising economic power. It is going to touch $5 trillion sooner or later, rather sooner than later, and there is a large market in India. The demographic of India is much younger than most other countries, including China, which is really aging, leave alone the Americans or the Japanese or the Europe for that matter. So that really leaves America in a very odd situation economically. Add to that, there is the importance of Indo-Pacific because of the trade routes going from here. And then on top of that, there's the China threat, economically, politically, and militarily. So therefore, when you put all of these things together, India is really pivotal, and whichever side it joins, whether the Chinese side or the American side, is going to have the edge. And right now, India is joining its own side, and that's not making the US very happy. So, what is the deal with the trip that uh, Narendra Modi made to Moscow recently? The main agenda, it seems, was, as I had mentioned in the earlier video, you can see it here. You can go to my timeline and then just watch that. So I'd already called out that the main takeaways from this trip would be trade, energy, and defense. And defense is one area that the Americans really want India to move away from Russia, so that they can sell Indians their weapons and therefore control a lot of things. But there is a trade element, and that trade element is probably right now the most important thing, because there is a lot of pressure on the US dollar after the Saudis refused to sign the petrodollar deal. Now, if you don't know enough about that deal or about what the petrodollar means, you can watch my video here and you can just go through it and you'll get a bit of a sense of what the whole agreement was about. And it has not been renewed. So that's about 50 years in existence, and now it's not there. So it allows the Saudis to sell their petrol and whatever their petroleum products in other currencies, and therefore the dollar would be under pressure. Now there's a reason why the Americans are facing so much of inflation. It's not just because Trump or Biden have printed a lot of currency and during COVID and other times. It's also because the US is really dependent on China and manufacturing outside of the United States, and therefore Donald Trump is running on the premise that he wants to make America a manufacturing superpower again. Now the question is that with all of this happening, how does India fit into all this, and why are the Americans throwing a fit? After all, it's not like India has become friends with China, or that India is sitting in the Russian camp from a military standpoint. So one of the key reasons is because if India, China and Russia are in agreement in BRICS for a new currency, then that's the end of the US dollar. And if the US dollar ends, so does the United States of America. So therefore it is pivotal for the US to make sure that the Indians are with them, and also that they are kind of keeping with the dollar. Now there are a lot of theories as to how fast this de-dollarization would go, but I can tell you one thing, that it's none of those theories might play out. It could go down in a day, or it could take 20 years. So that's a lot of variation. But at the same time, when policymakers get together and think about strategies, they have to plan for all contingencies. And therefore, when the Americans see that India is canoodling with Putin, they get a fit. But the point is that when you make any cold calculation about the Indian foreign policy, you will see that there is a continuity. And that continuity is simple, that India does not, cannot, will not ever leave Russia. I repeat, India will never ever leave Russia. And the reason is China. As a continental power which has a long coastline, we first have to look at the continental aspect, which is where we face China and Pakistan. So for an Indian policymaker, a huge landmass like the Russians and the huge landmass of China, if they get together, not only do they have the resources, they can run over India anytime. And therefore, it is a existential threat for India. Just the way the Russians are considered an existential threat for the United States of America. Now coming back to the hug, I thought it was a very warm hug, because you're having a bilateral meeting, you're meeting Putin at his home. What else do you expect? Do you expect a cold handshake, especially when there are optics that are going to be sending a signal to everybody in the world? So even if things didn't go too well inside the room, they're going to always look good on the outside. So therefore that hug was very important even for India. Now I've explained why it's important for the US. From the Indian standpoint, from a economic standpoint, India is not happy with all the sanctions that America keeps putting here and there. And one of the threats that we face economically is a higher oil price. If the petroleum goes higher, then because India is a oil importing and a importer overall, therefore it becomes imperative for India to bring down the cost of imports. Uh, and if it is all dependent on the dollar, then the US will control everything. So, from the Indian policymaker standpoint, Russia is a key player. Supposing Russia didn't have the resources or the oil and the weaponry that they had, India wouldn't have bothered about Russia. But because all of this is true, and that uh, these resources are still there and they still need to be tapped, I don't think India can really look away from Russia. And I think the Americans understand it, but they're trying some old school tactics to kind of arm twist India into signing something they don't want. And obviously their distaste for Modi also plays into this, and their hatred for Putin also plays into this. And I do think it's a very poor policy when the US ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, pretty much threatened India, saying that, Indians cannot take this relationship because it's not that deep. Now, we all know what has happened with countries that have a very deep relationship with the US. So, I think India should be worried, and rightly so. And today, with the Trump assassination attempt, uh, there's a there's a perception in India that India needs to be really, really careful when it comes to the US, because with the Chinese, you can kind of, we know the Chinese, and they don't have the kind of stranglehold on the international financial system. They don't have the kind of military the US has right now. So they have really, really deep pockets, and they are really embedded in the Indian system over the last 200 years. So you can't really wish them away, but you have to handle them. And I think the Indian government's major challenge in the next 12 months, 24 months, if the government survives that long, is going to be this relationship. And I don't see it going anywhere north. I see it going south, as in worse. So that is what I think about it. You let me know what you think about this and leave your comments below. If you liked my content and this video, please share it, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications. Thank you for watching. This was Sumit from Talksonground. Good day, good night, wherever you are. Bye bye.